So why are we here, and what is it we're trying to ultimately discover that will be sound, workable solutions around a changing set of issues? It won't be a surprise to any of you that we're going to talk about AI and load growth, among other topics, as part of the day. But I think fundamentally, reliability has been a top priority for as long as competitive markets have been in place, and a component of reliability, of course, is resource adequacy. And we look at that concept, and we know FERC will be hosting a technical conference on it in June. It really boils down to having sufficient supply available to meet energy demands in a specific service territory or a state or a region at all times, including at times of peak demand. For some time, that conversation has revolved around paying too much for capacity and, of course, how the market was performing, according to some, over-procuring resources. Of course, that was during a period of stagnant load growth and healthy reserve margins, and wasn't something all stakers even agreed to at the time. Today, however, we find ourselves in a very different world. First, load growth isn't coming, it's already here. And by all accounts, it's going to be an issue that we have to deal with for years to come. Secondly, the low prices that previously signaled resources were no longer needed and should retire have sent the message, and the market responded. Unfortunately, that message was sent right before, it turns out, a lot of those resources were needed. So the reasons that we have a slow pace of resources being added to the system are many. Slow approval queues, supply chain constraints for key equipment and machinery, approved but not constructed projects, permitting and siting delays, you all know the list. They all combine to hamper quick response to the growing demand in our changing conditions. But the key question that we hope to have discussion around and answer today is, what are we going to do in response? Today, you're going to hear from state and federal regulators about how they're thinking about the issue, how they're approaching them, and how the concept of cooperative federalism is playing out in real life, emphasis on cooperative, as I always say. We're also going to continue the conversation with a focus on delivering real, timely solutions to the system, and our first panel will spend time talking about how solutions can be implemented to set up long-term success from the view of generators, customers, and regulators. Over lunch, we'll have a fireside chat with the District of Columbia's Public Service Commission Chairman Emil Thompson and FERC Commissioner Lindsay See to check our scorecards and see how we've done so far this morning, and to ensure that we continue to remain focused on solutions and effective partnerships between state regulators and their federal counterparts in the afternoon. Once we finish that fireside chat, we're next going to get insights from multiple RTOs and the National Reliability Organization into their thinking about how the execution of how the industry can deliver resource adequacy. This is where we'll try to figure out the math and make sure that it's mathing, as I was told yesterday. Of course, once you figure out the math, you have to ensure that the right processes are in place to deliver the energy that's needed. And what can be done to move quickly, and simply saying that we need permitting and siting reform simply won't be an acceptable response. There's more to it than that, though that's certainly part of it. And in the end, we all need to know we need to get gigawatts on the grid. Why do we need to move at a faster pace? What improvements and changes are being made to ensure that all sectors can meet the moment? What impact does the supply chain have on the ability to move quickly and deliver cutting-edge and traditional solutions? How are these challenges impacting economic development? And we can't miss the role that data centers and AI, of course, are playing and will continue to play in putting new demands on the system, delivering investment opportunities for generators and utilities alike, and how those impacts will benefit and also impact the wallets of families and businesses who pay the bills. With that, and to stay on schedule, we're going to get right to our first fireside chat. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first panelist, NARUC President Tricia Pridemore, also Georgia PSC Commissioner. She is leading the National Association through a meaningful load growth scenario for the first time in many of our careers, with resource retirements, an evolving resource mix, emerging technologies, all of which are simultaneously impacting the electric system. In any normal year, whatever that is anymore, each one of those issues would be a primary issue requiring a regulator's full attention. Also joining us this morning is FERC Commissioner David Rosner. Commissioner Rosner joined the FERC as a commissioner in June of 2024, but also has 15 years of experience across energy technologies, and prior to his service as a commissioner, he was an energy industry analyst for FERC and spent 2 years on detail at the U.S. Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee Democratic staff. During his time as a staff member at FERC, he led efforts related to the Commission's rulemaking on energy storage resources, electric transmission, offshore wind integration, fuel security, and natural gas electric coordination, an issue, of course, that is near and dear to all of our hearts. So with that, we're going to jump right into the questions. Much is being made about the moment of time that we're in and some of the issues that we're facing, as I tried to lay out a moment ago, and each of you is positioned to have real impact on how we're going to address those at the state and federal level. So let me ask you the first question and just kind of throw this right out and get it over with. So markets are getting a lot of discussion these days, and there really isn't a need for me to remind you or our guests where EPSA stands on the issue. But it's important for us to think, how are you thinking about some of these issues? And how do markets fit into the larger energy landscape from the west to the southeast, and also the usual suspects? So, Commissioner, do you want to go first?
Thank you. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, EPSA. It's a real honor to be here with everyone and President Pridemore. Wonderful to be with you again. Look forward to our conversation today. I've got a piece of paper in front of me. The reason I need it is I want to quote some consumer savings numbers accurately. Markets in places where we have them in the country have delivered value to consumers. PJM, $3 to $4 billion in consumer savings annually. MISO, $5 billion per year. SPP, $3 billion per year. Western Energy Imbalance Market, $6 billion in gross benefits over the last decade. What's great about markets, it allows us to do more with less. It allows us to optimize around the generation, transmission assets that we have and efficiently use this system. Now, I love this question because there's been a lot of innovation in markets. My philosophy is, let's meet people where they are. Let's meet regions where they are. Just recently, I had the pleasure of working on a proposal from Commissioner Pridemore's part of the country to initiate a market there. Also have spent a lot of time working in the West. You know, it goes without saying, the system that we have today is fundamentally different than it was 20 years ago. It's a lot tighter, which means we need, in places where we have markets, they're being used to make the most efficient use of the system. Other, observation that I have is, in the past, we've had experiments with markets where, that we've dabbled with the idea of like, would one thing be simpler? I mean, I can tell you, having reviewed some of these proposals, yes, it would be, but I don't think that's optimal. I think, what's unfolding today and over the last decade is we're seeing regions develop markets and in ways that suit their unique regional needs. And so regional differences is a key term in our FERC dockets. You all know that well. That just rings very true today. The other thing I'd say about markets as we work through the energy evolution is that we have come up with methods to determine the value and send the right signal to invest in places where generation is needed that have really gotten a lot smarter. What was a rule of thumb, a decade ago, now we have a lot of experience with different ways to accredit resources. That's the kind of smart tool that we can use to drive the generation build with the right attributes in the places on the grid where it's needed. I've been really grateful to have had a chance to work with your members on developing those. Are they perfect? No. Are they a lot better than they were? Yes. And again, I mentioned my philosophy. My other philosophy is if we can get to a consensus where we can get 70-80% of the way there, to me, looking for something that's durable, that we can iterate from and build on, that's much better, and that's where I want to drive. So that's sort of my bid on this one.
I think that's a terrific starting point. And Commissioner Pridemore, before I ask you to answer, I will reward you by saying you almost had to put $5 in the standard market design jar, but you didn't. You avoided that. So, Madam President, would you like to share kind of the Georgia and the national perspective from the state regulatory view?
If there's a swear jar in this, I'll just go ahead and get my wallet now. Hi, thank you, Todd. Thank you, EPSA and the board for this invitation. It is an honor to serve not only the Georgia Public Service Commission as a statewide elected commissioner, but also to serve as president of NARUC. I was honored to be elected by my peers back in November, and enjoy the work, enjoy understanding different markets, and of course, regions of the country and understanding the needs of state commissions and their utilities and their market participants as well. It's also always fantastic to be with Commissioner Rosner. He and I tend to have a good time together and solve many, many problems. So. On the market subject, so I'm not from a traditional market state. I regulate a vertically integrated investor-owned utility, but with the introduction of SEAM, our commissions have gotten very, very deep into market structure and what works to be able to provide benefit for all users and customers within our given state and given region. So I'm excited to watch SEAM continue to grow and mature. Every month they break a new record in trades, which is exciting to see, and I think that the best is still yet to come. I spend a lot of time with state commissioners, as you would expect, and especially those that are from market states, such as the PJM states and the MISO states in particular. And I recognize that there are things that may exist within their given laws or within their appointment process that provide some challenges for them to rise to the occasion, as Todd said in his video, for all of us to meet this demand, to be able to take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in our generation, so that we can see how we're going to be able to meet this demand and how we're going to do so, not just for the betterment of customers, but for the betterment of our country. And so with that in mind, that was why my year as NARUC president, I wanted to focus on this conversation. In addition to some gas electric harmonization work, we'll talk about that, I'm certain. But focus on helping state commissioners understand what are their processes that could be improved upon, and then really reach a dialogue with hyperscalers, new onshore manufacturing companies, and then work with utilities and market participants, work with the RTOs and the ISOs, so that they have the knowledge that they need, so they can go back to their commissions and they can improve upon their state regulatory processes. So much of what we talk about, I think, is it's nice to do for tomorrow, so to speak, but I really believe that this is now, and we must take advantage of this opportunity. And the states and the markets that are willing to go first and willing to make these tough choices and take this risk, I know from experience that's where it's going to pay off.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, for that. I think you've done a terrific job of setting up our discussion, because since we have a FERC Commissioner and the NARUC President with us, it seems appropriate to ask a couple of things. How do you think cooperative federalism is working in practice? How do you think it should work? And what are some of the things we could do to collectively make it work better? Everyone's looking at you, Commissioner, so I think you drew the short straw.
I will start.
Lucky
I wanted to give my colleague an opportunity to seize that one, but I'll go. And what I would say is this. The first thing that I did as a commissioner was go to NARUC. It was Florida in July. The weather was perfect. I've never enjoyed cold AC and reliable power as much as I did that weekend. But look, to be earnest about this, I have gone to every NARUC since then. I'd gone to a few before. It is incredibly impactful and valuable, and frankly essential for me to be able to do the job that I have now. Having that input from my state regulator colleagues is just, I could not do this job without it. And I use the information that I get from state regulators who are closer to consumers than I am. We regulate the interstate, they regulate the last mile, and they take the rates from the interstate system and they allocate them to their customers. Having that input from states is essential to making good policy at FERC. That's what I believe. And I know it's true. And I know when we have challenging filings, especially some of the ones that come in through the Section 205 Federal Power Act door, and we're talking amongst colleagues, having an idea of where states are, it has been incredibly valuable to getting compromise on my commission. Other things I'd say is that, I think cooperative federalism works well. One place we see that every day is on the transmission planning side. We're responsible for the interstate system, as I mentioned a minute ago. States have jurisdiction to site that infrastructure, and we need their expertise and unique knowledge of their state and the people who live there to do that efficiently. The states regulators are responsible for figuring out, who should pay the interstate costs, what classes of customers. That's very important. And also, when you think about the Federal Power Act, the state and federal jurisdiction, it overlaps. It is not hermetically sealed. And so, by design, by the statutory design, we have to talk to each other. I also, I know over the past few years, the NARUC colleagues and FERC commissioners have had a task force, a state federal task force. It pursued transmission for a while. That's something that I came after that meeting cycle had ended, and now we're about to start a cycle on natural gas electric coordination. And again, the same thing. The states, in many cases, own all of the firm entitlements, in some cases, on the interstate natural gas pipeline system. We're all in this together, and I'm very excited to keep working on the gas electric issue. And I think making progress on that at this point, everyone in this room who's worked in industry for a while knows we've done coordination, we've done gas day, we've done information sharing, we've done a lot here. We've done capacity performance of various different iterations to reflect risk, and we've done a lot. And so I'm really excited about this task force so that we can say, hey, all right, what ground haven't we tilled? Where's the fertile ground for more work? And what does that look like, and how do we do it together? Over to you, Commissioner.
So first, thank you for your first meeting being that July in West Palm. Yes, AC was incredibly important, and I think the point was made that electricity is paramount to all of us. But to your question, Todd, and this is just the world according to me, and where I see this as my 7 years as a commissioner. We have thriving systems when there is consistency. When you know where I'm coming from, when you see me coming, and there are no surprises. And it is consistency that I would love to see out of Washington that helps my state. The politicalization of energy and power, it has not provided for assurances of reliability for our customers. For the people that I see at Publix that give me a hard time over the price of their bill, or the fact that after a hurricane that they were out of service for a few hours. Those are the people that I face, those are the people that I talk to, and those are the people that I'm responsible for. So consistency is paramount. And I don't care if you're a Wall Street investor or a utility or a generator or a market. The signs of consistency are incredibly valuable and key. And so I want to see consistency regardless of who's in the White House. I want to see a focus on reliability and making sure that America has the necessary energy that we need. And so I think that it's going to be an exciting 4 years. And I know that I can always count on a consistent voice coming out of our friends at the FERC because they are thoughtful in this approach. And I know that consistency is going to better my state and better the people that I serve. To Commissioner Rosner's point about gas electric harmonization, so the FERC-NARUC Joint Task Force this year is going to focus on delivering natural gas to electricity generators. And I have had the blessing and the honor over the last year and 3 months to lead GEAR, which was provisioned by past NARUC President, now Congresswoman Julie Fedorchak, the Gas Electric Alignment for Reliability, which includes 7 state commissioners and every member of the gas to electric value chain. So we don't have a transmission operator because we're only dealing with moving natural gas to generation facilities. And EPSA has had fantastic representation, and I'm not just saying this because he's in the room, but Chris Moser has done an outstanding job for you all. He is my favorite person on gear. He knows it. He reminds me of that on a regular basis. But he has consistently delivered on his knowledge and understanding of what you all do and how it is so beneficial to this challenge that we're facing. The one thing about gear that we didn't want was just another report, another group of experts who sit in a room and come up with advice and counsel, and it's just one more thing for us to read on the weekends and shove in a desk drawer. We wanted to get the people in the room where we could actually make strides, where we could actually do some things that would move the needle. So the first thing Gear did was we established the Readiness Forum. The Natural Gas Readiness Forum now meets annually to help pre-winter assessment and to align all of the people within the value chain on a regional basis. So imagine a state like me, a state like mine, my emergency management professional can work with a meteorologist that is 4 states over, that can work with a utility 4 states over, that knows the people in system operations in Louisiana and Texas. By the way, if you're not familiar with Georgia, everything to us comes from the West. And so it provides an environment for those connections and those conversations to take place. We had our first readiness forum back in December. We're planning it again. We're also planning to regionalize this for a little while so that we can get more people into the fold faster. The second recommendation that came out of GEAR was a call for new natural gas infrastructure. You can imagine when you get a bunch of highly opinionated, quasi-judicial, quasi-legislative commissioners involved in NARUC. We have a lot of opinions about things that we hold very strong opinions about, and we're not afraid to share those with each other. But the one thing that's been exciting out of GEAR and out of the folks at NARUC is we finally have commissioners that are saying, yeah, it's time. We've waited. We've done enough things. We've tried everything else. We've beat the drum, but at the end of the day, we need pipelines, and we need new natural gas infrastructure. And so that recommendation was passed back in February at our Winter Policy Summit. We just out of GEAR finished a recommendation on gas storage, which I know that at the April 30th FERC NARUC Joint Task Force meeting that we've got some members that are going to share that. But there are other things that we're working on. We wrap up GEAR in November. It's been an honor to work with these people. We spend at least one meeting a month deep in the weeds, and it's been incredibly insightful for the state commissioners that are involved to recognize that there are people that live and breathe and eat this just as much as they do. And it's not just utilities that come in when it's time for a rate case. And I think that message is what I'll take away, and I think what my colleagues will take away has been the most beneficial. That there are people that they're thinking about this and they're planning for this, and this is not just hyperbole in another report.
Well, before we get into the subject of the day, of course, that everyone wants to talk about, which is load growth and AI, since you both mentioned this, I think it's appropriate for us to talk a little bit about pipeline infrastructure. To your point, President Pridemore, about the importance of additional infrastructure and how we're going to use that to power the system going forward. How are you thinking about it at the state level, and then Commissioner Rosner at the federal level, about how are we going to think about utilizing gas where we don't necessarily need it 24/7, 365, and the dreaded just by firm response that makes my hair catch fire? So how do we think about that from FERC's perspective, and how are we going to address issues under the Natural Gas Act, perhaps? Or how are states looking at this from the state purview, because it's as important at the state level, clearly, as it is at the federal level? And then how are we thinking about ways to ensure there's a better alignment between the state and federal approaches? I mean, the collaboration piece, I think, is critical. I think the task force speaks to some of that. But really, that's where the rubber will meet the road, is if decisions are made here but can't be implemented there, or there's decisions that need to be made here but need some other authority. How are we thinking about that? In Georgia or in the Southeast generally, how are you thinking about that? And then, Commissioner Rosner, kind of how are you thinking about it at FERC?
I need another pipeline. I do.
Okay.
I do. You look at, so post-pandemic, You look at the states that have had the largest population growth and the largest business growth. When I've lived in Georgia for 30 years, I've never seen anything like this. If you thought Atlanta traffic was bad the last time the Braves won the World Series, come on down and prepare to just sit and idle with me. We're packed. We've received nearly 1 million new residents since the pandemic. Florida's received 3.25. And I tease all the time that people that land in Georgia, it's because they were on their way to Florida and they just got tired. They're like, just it's enough. Louisiana's growing. Texas is popping. And so for us, all of that population is fantastic. And the business growth is fantastic. But do you know what it needs? Infrastructure. We have to serve these people. We're a diversified generation state. We like it all. If it creates an electron, honey, bring it on. I love it. I like solar plus batteries. We just provisioned 1,000 megawatts of new battery storage. I still have coal. I love my coal plants. Honey, it's an electron. Bring it. We are the largest producer of clean energy in the nation with Plant Vogtle Units 3 and 4 coming online last year. We're so proud of our nuclear fleet with the 6 units. We need more nuclear. And please, can we get more nuclear before that workforce and that supply chain that we struggled and bled for to bring up for Vogtle Units 3 and 4 atrophies? Part of the challenges with 3 and 4 was the fact that we hadn't built one in 30 years, Todd. And so you have to make that from scratch. Please, let's not let that go away. Please, let's put these people back to work and keep this moving. Please, let's keep the supply chains active. But at the core of it, whether it's interruptible, whether it is to still supply service to the LDCs, which are fantastic in our state and growing every day, we need gas. 50% of our generation in Georgia is still gas. Meanwhile, we have states, I know they're looking at these future of gas dockets and looking for ways to have these no pipes alternatives. And all I can say is that can't work for me. It's just not going to work for me. So we need another pipeline. I need it tomorrow. Actually, I needed it yesterday. And so we have an active approach in our state and our neighboring states to partner in this conversation in Washington and to continue just telling the story and making sure that folks understand just how important this is to us.
Well, I just want to circle back on gear and the Winter Readiness Forum briefly, just to say, hey, you know, and I think I saw EPSA at your board meeting to say, you know, say a similar thing, but now that the winter is over, there was very good performance of the system this past winter. It held strong, and that wasn't an accident. That took lots of planning, preparation, engineering, and you know, we are right now working on a report, not an assessment, but a report to talk about not what went wrong, but what went right. Because I think some things went right, and that was a lot of work to get there. We've done several iterations of cold weather standards. We've done a lot more on incentives to firm up generator fuels portfolios in places where there are markets. And I appreciated the industry-led voluntary approach to thinking through up the supply chain. How do we make sure that fuel source is reliable? On infrastructure, you know, my view on infrastructure is that I think we need more infrastructure of all types in this country. That's pretty clear. I am incredibly excited about the prospect of growing demand. Load growth is economic growth. That's good for the country. That's jobs. What could be more important than working towards making that a reality? And so the approach that my colleagues and I at FERC have been taking on the natural gas infrastructure side is to look for bipartisan agreement to move these applications forward consistent with our statutory obligations and all the things that courts have asked us to do. And I think we've been successful. And that's important because, you know, my observation, having worked on energy policy in D.C. for about 20 years, is that all of the above, that there is strength in diversity, that has served the country well, that it's hard to predict the future, but I really can't think of an infrastructure investment that has been made in the last 20 or 30 years that has been a regret. Now, that doesn't mean that circumstances don't change. They do. These are hard decisions. Part of this job that you and I do is decision-making under uncertainty. We take the best information we can. We look to maximize the value to consumers, make sure people are safe and comfortable in their homes, make sure businesses have power, heat, and just make the best decisions we can. And that's the job. It's not always easy. It's very easy to Monday morning quarterback these decisions. But again, I'm an optimist. I think we've been making good progress here, and I look forward to continuing to do that with you and your colleagues at NARUC and colleagues on the commission, and with everyone in this room who has a hand in it.
I have to second that. I think that the level of activity at the FERC right now is just warp speed, which is what we need. No, thank you.
Well, we've already covered a lot of ground, and we haven't even gotten to the order of the day, which is load growth, which everybody is talking about. I think everyone is marrying that with reliability. I think that's perfectly appropriate. It's frankly in all the papers. If you opened your Twitter feed this morning or you picked up your paper, there was at least one or more stories about load growth, AI, machine learning, all of the things that come with it. It's been on every energy podcast you listen to, including our own Energy Solutions. If you don't listen to it, you should subscribe. It's important, though, to, I think, get a sense for how you're thinking about the reality of load growth and the load growth phenomenon. We've seen a range of numbers. The analysis I've seen is anywhere from 2% to 10% year over year in perpetuity for a period of years. I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician. I don't know what the right number is. It's probably somewhere in between those. And to your point about need for infrastructure, I mean, we've got to power that new load growth that we really haven't dealt with in 20 or 30 years. So I guess to kick off the conversation, how are you thinking about some of those issues? What's your expectation around load growth? Maybe you have a much better line of sight than I do. I'm hoping somebody does, so that we're making the right investments at the right amount. But how are you thinking about that from the regulatory perspective? Because President Pridemore, to your point, we have to move fast, and we are not moving fast enough.
To your point, Todd, I think you made it and you didn't even realize it, that the conversation about rapid load growth it calls for biting it off in chunks. I'm not going to eat this cake in one swallow. I'm going to be able to eat this cake in smaller bites. And the best place to do that is working with state regulators and state legislators, getting the states involved so that they have skin in the game. I think that we've approached this very differently in Georgia than I know other states are looking at it. But we did it, and we were first. Back in 2023, Georgia Power came to the State Commission and said, we need 7,100 megawatts of new electric generation. And we laughed at them. This is as we were turning Vogtle Unit 4 on. I mean, we audibly laughed at them. It was like, get out. And then I started talking with the customers. And this is, I had been on plenty of manufacturing tours and had talked with folks that were looking to switch over processes in a manufacturing plant and spent a lot of time on manufacturing floors. But when I started talking with these big tech companies and they started mapping out for me what their plans were, it just blew my mind. I came out of the tech space. I used to own a software company that I was blessed to sell several years ago, and I hosted a portion of my software offering at a data center. Back then we called it an ASP. Now it's called the cloud. It's the same damn thing. But at the end of the day, I recognized that I paid for 5.9 service. I paid for that center to be up 99.999% of the time. And to do that, it required two things. That server to be available 24/7, 365, and for it to be cool 24/7, 365, especially in Georgia. So the importance of this, for me, immediately clicked. And then I put myself through AI school, and I started understanding what was happening on the global scale and where the United States had to win this, where we had to protect the intellectual property of AI on our soil instead of it being farmed out to another country. This is a long-term national security imperative, and I say that as somebody who has no national security background at all, but I do have a tech background, and I know how data is served, I know how data is transferred, and I know the importance of securing that data. And so providing them this necessary energy is key. I look at it in a much smaller chunk than what we're looking at these national numbers. And I tend to scoff at the national numbers because I know that there's a lot of comments and rumors about, well, they're just double counting. Well, they're shopping this load across generators and across states and markets. And if I can concentrate on what's before me and get those customers into my state and put them under contract, I'm going to do it all day long and twice on Sunday because it's strong for my utility, it's strong for my state, it's strong for my local tax base and schools. I mean, I see nothing but goodness from this. But to do this, it's going to require action, and it's going to require thoughtfulness, and it's going to require everybody just being flat out honest with each other. And I think right now, in my experience, that's all I'm seeing. The hyperscalers that I work with and talk with in my state, they're under contract. We're in this together. It is a partnership. We're proud, they're proud, and we all work. I think where the rubber's going to meet the road a little bit is when they're fully saturated and they've got what they need for a time being, and we go down into that second tier where capital is more sparse, where there's not consistency of business record, and it increases the risk. I think that's where we're going to have more challenges. But right now, these big guys that have, I mean, they have revenue larger than my whole state. I mean, how can I go wrong?
So a couple thoughts to add onto that perspective, which is incredibly insightful and useful to hear your experience with the loads. You know, definitely I'm seeing the picture more aggregated up, and you know, I'm convinced that there is a lot of load growth. It is a generational amount of load growth. I do, you know, we have had a couple different efforts at the commission to get our head around this and move the ball forward. We had a technical conference over the summer, in the fall, and then we have an open proceeding in one region of the country where we're looking for answers to some of these questions. I think getting more precise on the numbers is important. But for me, I think we know enough with enough certainty to know that this is urgent. So in places where we have markets, the goal is to make sure that we have a set of rules in place that fit the needs of what businesses want to do. You know, I personally don't have a one-size-fits-all in mind on this. And again, I'm going to be a little bit light on the details because of our open proceeding. But that, you know, my hope is that, you know, we can get a compromise or get some rules of the road in place so that people can move forward with whatever arrangement suits their needs and then get out of the way. This will be hard. It's difficult to get agreement, as folks know, but I think it's so important for the country that we have to try and we have to do it. On the load interconnection side, this idea that you know, perhaps, you know, some of these load requests are, you know, they're looking around the country. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a symptom of people really want to move forward. They want to build these projects, and so we need to find ways to do it, and we need to be smart about it. So if there are, you know, it reminds me of, we've done a lot of work on the interconnection queue side where we had reforms that the goal of those reforms was to try and get more certainty about who is going to move forward with their requests to connect. I think similar ideas could be appropriate for making sure that we're counting load and planning appropriately. Although, you know, some of that is also, I think, would be an industry best practice that transmission owning utilities could implement themselves. I also am really front and center in front of the commission right now is this balancing economic development, reliability, and affordability. And that in itself is incredibly challenging. And that's where, again, this state-federal interaction is central to resolving those conversations. Reliability, non-negotiable. It's not reliable if it's not affordable. We've all been there before, but that's the balance that we're trying to strike in our work. Again, I'm optimistic about our proceeding in one region of the country, but we have a lot of work to do. And the only other thing I'd say is I hope that our open proceeding doesn't discourage people who have developed things that they might want to bring to the commission from doing that whenever it's ready. Because I personally, and I am willing to consider things on a case-by-case basis. I think we've learned a lot over the past year about this. And I think you all have learned a lot about what some of the issues that state regulators care about here, what FERC cares about here, and I'm more optimistic than ever before that we can find that balance that we need to move this forward.
You both mentioned the cost piece, and I think that's critical. Tricia, to your comment about it's here and we need to build it and we want to build it, there's consumer impacts, right? Somebody has to pay the bill at the end of the day for all of this. And so how are you thinking maybe about making sure we're solving for the right solution and not for some random projection that may be right or maybe not and could potentially have impacts to consumers that last for decades because of charges that are added to the bill or overbilled or all the things, the worst case scenarios that could happen? How are you thinking through trying to solve for the right problem and then do so in a way that tries to keep it cost effective? I don't dislike the word affordable, but I think it varies by person, right? Like what's affordable for you may not be affordable for someone else. But a cost effective system is one that is reliable and everybody has access to. How do you think about navigating through solving the right problem and then making sure it's affordable or cost effective for as many consumers as possible?
As I tell my friend Commissioner John Reynolds on the California Commission, in Georgia, affordable is defined as whatever's cheaper in California. It's true, but to add to that, to be able to meet this demand, I've yet to find one of these customers that's coming to my state that wants to build a data center or wants to bring their manufacturing facility back onto American soil that doesn't want to pay for it. We have, I think, longer-term affordability concerns when you talk about stranded assets and some aspects there. But right now, I don't have one of these customers in my state that is not paying for, plans to pay for, will pay for, willing to pay for generation, transmission, and distribution to serve them. And what our commission has done is we've put Georgia Power in the position to where they've got to have a contract that says that that's going to take place. They're given a schedule of costs where they pay as they pay as they go during construction. It still takes them longer to build the infrastructure than it does to pop up the data center. So they're invested. We're not running into these companies that don't want to pay and aren't willing to pay. And that allows us to still produce a reliable, healthy system that can put downward pressure on residential rates and other C&I customer rate classes. A new pipeline gives us more accessibility to bring in more generation, to be able to make those manufacturing processes faster and simpler, and Todd, hold your ears, move them all to a firm contract instead of an interruptible contract. But I'll say we're just not there yet when it comes to finding people that in these companies and corporations that aren't willing to pay and will stick their neck out for it. I think when we get further along and we have the companies that aren't as willing and aren't as capable of doing so, I think that's where affordability becomes a real strong concern when you look at the rest of the rate classes.
I'll just, if I could, I'd just say that really resonates. I think one of the good things about the situation that we find ourselves in today is that there is willingness to pay, and that makes it easier. And so when I think about some of the regions of the country where we have market that we use to answer these questions, what reassures me is that we know that in places where there are markets, that the theory behind a market is that that is a very powerful tool to make efficient decision making that's disciplined, because there's skin in the game from both sides, and nobody's picking, and so in places where that's working well. I also have to say that in places where we have other ways of doing that, that's great too, and that those outcomes are smart and work for the states that have chosen that path, and even our places where we have markets, some states choose a hybrid approach, where they're doing a little bit of both. This is all about options, and some of the things that are really important to me as a commissioner at FERC are, let's make sure that we can have responses to prices. Let's make sure that we can have responses to demand. And so it's been a real pleasure for me to work on interconnection queue reform. Before my time, the commission issued a rulemaking to streamline that. That's incredibly important to meeting the demand and lowering prices, new entry. I've worked with my colleagues on some of the regions that have said, hey, we need a little bit of certain generation in certain places for reliability faster, because circumstances have changed. We've worked on those proposals. Those are very challenging, and I won't say that any of these solutions are perfect, but I think if you took a step back and you said, look at the direction that we're going, I think we're making progress. We still have a lot more work to do.
To your point, Commissioner Rosner, our nation needs for your businesses to be healthy. We need for your business to operate and be healthy and be profitable and create jobs. Absolutely. But we need your businesses to be healthy and have good access to capital right now so that we can meet this demand, especially in restructured states. We have load that's required and necessary in some of the largest market states in our country, and that requires you all to be able to serve that load. And so I think that it's often not said, and state regulators, we're supposed to just dump on utilities and dump on generators, dump on everybody. And it's not true. Our nation needs your business to survive and thrive and be healthy for all of us to be successful.
I'm going to resist the urge to ask for an amen because I'm trying to be mindful of your very tight schedule. So to wrap this up and not put too fine a point on it, because there are a lot of issues, and I think we've just scratched the surface in our hour together this morning. We're dealing with a whole host of issues that I talked about at the beginning: retirements, load growth, customer costs, cyber and physical security, misalignment of the need for resources and the ability to get them on the system quickly. At a high level, because you don't have enough time to get down too deep, but as deep as you want to go, how from your seat do we try to solve some of these issues? And what can industry do on our side of the table? We want to be an effective partner as well. It's not a one-way street where please do everything for us and then we'll decide whether or not we want to participate. We have an obligation as well. We want to do that. What can we do from our side of the table to help make sure we're meeting you in the middle so we're all getting the outcome that we want?
But I'll start if okay. What I would say, and I love this question, compromise, reach consensus, either among yourselves and other stakeholders. When I look back over the past decade or two, we have uncertainty when we go too far in one direction or another. And I was just at an event where Senator Murkowski said, it's not about who's in power, it's about getting power to people. And so what I will tirelessly advocate for, and as long as I serve on the commission, is consensus-driven decision-making. If we can have that, we can get you the stability you need to invest. And that might mean you don't get the perfect market, but you might get one that works well enough to invest and to grow and to run your business profitably and serve customers. And so that's my goal, is to find that balance. We've seen what happens over the past years when we do policy making by litigation, where we go off on a partisan path. I'm really optimistic that we're at this moment in our country where we are awash in energy. Whatever energy source you like, or the state you operating in might like, we've got more of it than we've ever had before in history. let's capitalize on that. Let's let the rising tide lift all boats, and let's try and come together as much as we can. And from my perspective, my door is open. I love to meet and talk in person and try and figure out and resolve some of these problems, some of these questions before we get into the pen pals in the docket situation, which is always harder. But again, I'm incredibly optimistic about the situation we're in, and I just really look forward to working with this industry going forward.
Amen. To Commissioner Rosner's point, though, that certainty comes with consistency. And so I'll go back to what I said a little bit ago about the importance of consistency. Recognizing that everything may not be perfect, but we have this opportunity, and shame on us if we don't seize it. Shame on us if we let this moment pass us and we let other nations take this opportunity away from us. Because the rising tide lifts all boats, but you know, it all rolls downhill. It's metaphor Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day it is. But you see what I'm saying, where you have the ability to step up and do something amazing, and your companies have the ability to do something amazing, and you just simply have to do it. And if we don't, I think as a country, as regulators, as the folks that are in the room, if we don't seize this opportunity, well, then shame on us, because it's right there for us, and it's once in a generation.
I couldn't agree more with that.